We're going to call the Coordinated Committee Community Service Section to order, and I'd first like to just inform everyone that Mayor Brian Smith is out of the country and was unavailable to attend today. And with that said, I think the first order of business is deputations, petitions, presentations, and public meetings. We have none. Unfinished business. Is there anything we're dealing with today? This one here? Yeah, but we'll be in the agenda, right? So beachfront safety enhancements, and we will get to in the agenda. Other agency reports. If I, Chief Mike McWilliam. Oh, right, and thank you. Yes, I haven't received any notice of pecuniary interest, but if one comes up during the meeting, please notify me. Morning, Chief.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very brief report today. The fire department, we responded to 113 calls for service in the month of October. As I spoke about at our last meeting, October is Fire Prevention Week falls during October, so that was a busy month for us at doing our schools and so on. So that kept us hopping. One thing I did want to talk about, because it's hit the press now, is the Quality Care Program. It's a program in partnership with Paramedic Services where they're training the fire departments in the county to give Narcan for opioid overdoses. So this will be a new thing for us. Craig, the deputy, has been very involved with the planning of this. We're going to be one of the first departments. We're going to get started right away in January with this training. Part of it actually includes the giving of epinephrine as well. So that'll be a new service that we offer. So part of this too is, especially for the opioid part, is the safety of the emergency responders, because we can be exposed to this. And it doesn't take very much of an exposure to have an effect on a person. So, it's a two-part thing. It's for the patient, but it's also safety for the emergency responders. So I'll keep committee up to date on that as we start to move into that in January. And the other thing we're working on right now is just planning our emergency operations annual exercise and training. So that'll fall either later this month or very early in December. I'll let committee know when that happens as well. And the rest is in the report, and that's all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chief.
Mr. Chairman, through you to the Chief. Does that put any more liability on the local municipality? Takes it off the region? Or have they talked about that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, it does not put any more liability on our municipality. This program is under a doctor's supervision through the county. It causes us no more liability at all.
Any other comments or questions? I just had one, Chief, and that is this something that we would track calls that might involve this new service, that we would have an idea of what level of exposure that our first responders are having?
Yeah, absolutely. That'll be some. So this is all very new, as you're aware, I'm sure. So we will be tracking this very closely to see whether this is a real concern in our community. We do know through some OPP stats that through the summer months there was some cases where opioid use was happening in the community. So, but yeah, we'll be following this closely and keeping stats.
Okay, and then the other question would be just is there any other gear or equipment or anything related that the fire department is going to require in delivering this service? Because certainly I know there's some protective gear involved, but you may already have it.
Yeah, that's correct. There is all the medical protective equipment that the department has will be the same stuff. So it's really just the two different drugs that we'll have to issue. So there'll really be no cost implications to this.
Okay, thank you. So moved by Councillor Bray and seconded by Councillor Smith, resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the November 2017 Fire Department report for information.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell.
In favor.
Chair Boulanger.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries and a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, we'll now move to the consent agenda, and before I read that motion, there were 2 items pulled. One was for the Waterfront Safety Enhancement Supplementary Report, and the other, the Recreation Events and Facilities Q3 Variance Report. So moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Bray. Resolved that the Community Service Section of Coordinated Committee does hereby receive the November 9th, 2017 consent agenda items 3.4 through 3.43, and that the recommendations contained therein be adopted as amended.
Mr. Chairman, the recreation events and facilities, I think I told the clerk that I wanted to speak to that. Am I the only one?
Yes.
You will now withdraw.
Okay, so then the only one is the beach safety.
Which report?
3. C3? Yeah.
That's this one. Third.
Where's Faye?
Okay, so good.
Thank you. So members of the committee, having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Boulanger.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries and a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, and the item related to beach safety, that was Councillor Stockwell.
Are you leaving the chair?
Sorry?
Are you leaving the chair?
Well, I had, where did our clerk go? Should I make a motion now and step down from the chair? Go
Thank you. You had indicated that you were wanting to perhaps have this matter referred.
Yes.
And as you are the chair, if you wanted to bring that forward yourself, then you would have to defer to the vice chair and ask them to take the chair.
Okay, so
I'll take the chair as vice chairman.
okay, thank you.
Any comments on this item? If not, Councillor, you want to speak to it?
Yes, I just wanted to make a motion to refer this to next month coordinated committee, in that I am having a meeting with the M&R on November 17th, and it may not be successful, but hopefully part of that discussion would be some of their participation in what we're trying to accomplish related to beach safety.
So, Madam Clerk, the first motion will be a motion to defer or refer. As far as procedure goes, I'll look to the CAO for help here. I had the matter to speak to, but if it's referred, then I'll pass on speaking. Should we take the referral motion first, and then if there's anybody that wants to speak to the motion, take it from there, or do you want to do it all up front?
Through you to Mr. Chair, the discussion would be on the motion to refer.
Okay. So this is the motion to defer. If it carries, it's referred. If it's defeated, then we can deal with the main motion. Any more comments? Deputy Bray?
Just a question about the meeting. Who's involved with that meeting? You said the ministry, but is it local office? Is it provincial? Is it who's involved?
I reached out to Greg Forbes personally. There's a meeting with the residents of New Wasaga Beach on that day as well. I had a number of topics because we also are talking to the M&R about a volunteer initiative to try to upgrade the picnic tables at the M&R.
Deputy?
Thank you. Which staff members will be going with you?
I believe that the CAO is involved in that meeting, and it's just going to happen just before or after, so the new Wasaga Beach residents meeting. So.
Any further questions, comments? If not,
Yeah, just a comment. Do you think the results of that meeting, so it sounds like a fairly low-level meeting, I don't think you're going to get the ministry to commit to any dollars, yet we as a council need to include an amount in our 2018 budget, so I'm not sure that deferring it will help us meet our deadline for the budget.
This is a very preliminary meeting. I'm not sure whether Greg Forbes has a discretionary budget. The difference is not a large amount between what we're currently had suggested at 14,600 going to 22,000. So he may not have any discretionary funds in his budget at all. I don't know that at this time.
any other questions, Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe the the director of Recreation Events and Facilities has had conversations with Ontario Parks with respect to the funding and potential for funding in the future, and he may have some comments in that regard. I know he's been in communication with Ontario Parks, so there may be some further information that may be helpful to committee.
Mr. Roos?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Definitely, although Josh is our primary on this report and helping us understand the additional cost of the flag system, I've been the primary contact with Greg, the superintendent, and he is aware, although first step would be to approve that we would go ahead with this plan. And then, unfortunately, water safety is a fairly delicate item, and it isn't always dealt with at the local level in the park system. And so what Greg has said to me is that he will, once he has the specific details of our signage, our flags, etc., he will have to seek approvals on the costing. But I did talk with him about financially supporting the plan and participating in this water safety initiative. It could be helpful to say yes so that we can formalize that plan, but I don't want to overcommit council to $24,000 for the complete plan without knowing if the M&R would help us financially. And I know that was the specific question, and he knows it, but he won't say yes until we clarify exactly what.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. So I won't support putting it off. I think that we need to pass this today. If we get extra money along the way, that would be fantastic. I think it's also important that we don't all be running off in different directions trying to have separate meetings. I think if staff, I think things need to be coming through staff. I think that's the easiest way to keep track of what's going on. Thank you.
Councillor Eagle?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I right from the beginning said that I wouldn't support this unless there was involvement from the M&R, and I still stand on that. I think that we have to know what the involvement is of the M&R before we should commit $25,000. I don't know why this can't be put off for a little while, other than maybe if it's budget problems or something like that there, but until we get some commitment from the M&R, I would rather defer this. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, Madam Clerk, do you want to put the motion through?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, when you hear your name,
Good
please
coaching.
answer in favor or opposed. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bifulci.
Opposed?
Councillor Bray.
Opposed?
Councillor Ego.
Opposed?
Councillor Smith.
Opposed.
Councillor Stockwell.
Opposed.
Mayor Smith. Or sorry, I apologize.
Opposed.
So, so the item to defer is defeated.
All right, so, Mr. Chairman, I'll leave the chair and pass it back to you, and you put me down to speak on the item, please.
Okay, thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Now, Mr. Chairman, when this matter was last discussed at committee, I was absent due to some surgery I was at. But anyway, I don't think we should be getting involved in this. It's clearly the responsibility of the MNR, and every time we go out and reach out to help the senior level of government, specifically the MNR, it seems that we get stuck with the cost, and we're stuck with the cost forever and a day. So I'm going to vote against the whole clause.
Councillor Bray?
Yeah, just a comment that the majority of this council voted to take over Beach 1 and 2. And I think the community enhancement or the waterfront safety enhancement was part of taking it over. If we want to control that beach, I think we have an obligation to provide. You know, lifeguards, if you look at a Grand Bend, you look at a Sable Beach, you look at other beaches, they have a system in place, and I think that this is the first step towards putting in place, or a program in place for Wasaga Beach. So I think to defeat it at this point is a mistake if we're going to be managing the beach.
Councillor Stockwell and then Councillor
Mr. Chair,
Smith.
I would totally support that if there was a history of problems on Beach 1 and 2. That's not where the problems are. The problems are the mouth of the river, and the river, we all know that. And the red flags you're flying are not on 1 and 2, they're on the mouth of the river. So here again, I would agree with what the councillor is saying, but it just so happens that Beach 1 and 2, what we have agreed to take over, does not have that problem.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you. I just want to concur with Councillor Stockwell. I think this is the point, and apparently there's no trespassing down there. You can't just walk down there without, it used to say endangered or no trespassing. And to me, that's the ministry's property. I would rather the money go into our own beach safety program rather than to the point that belongs to the MNR.
Any other?
I just agree wholeheartedly that I think that the mouth of the river, any money that is spent there either should be shared or should be the responsibility of the MNR, for all the reasons stated. You know?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to clarify Councillor Smith's comments, there is a lot of private property at the mouth of the river, but there is property that does have public access to that is right at the mouth of the river. So just to clarify that there is some area that does have public access, and that's commonly referred to as where the fishermen go to fish at the mouth of the river. That's public access.
Any further comments?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I did have a chance to walk down and visit the point area and had a good look at the signing that is currently posted to deter swimmers and waders in that area. There is not much down there, and there is a lot of areas where you can possibly park and walk directly down to a beach area on the river that you would not see any no swimming or wading areas. Now, I think there is, I think either through M&R or ourselves, there is a bit of a lack of signage down there. I know they've had some issues with signage washing away in the past because the 4x4 posts haven't stood up to rising waters. But I do see signage being required down there to enhance safety. And like I said before, there's a lot of access points down there where you wouldn't see that it's not safe to swim if you weren't from around here.
Counselor Bray?
Yeah, so again, I would just like to say that I do think this is a good first step, whether it's the ministry, whether it's the town. I think lives have been lost there, and we have to make some, we have to demonstrate that we do want to address those concerns. And I do think we need to start getting the signs up there. If we get some money from the ministry, it's a bonus, but I think we need to start.
Okay, any further comments? The original motion. So moved by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Eagle. Resolved that the Community Service Section of the Coordinating Committee recommends Council to approve an enhanced waterfront safety strategy involving the following elements: a signage program in Beach Area 1 and Beach Area 2, a waterfront safety community education campaign, a Life-Saving Society LSS audit, and a red flag program with signage at the river's mouth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
In favor?
Councillor Bray.
In favor?
Councillor Eagle.
Opposed?
Councillor Smith.
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell.
Opposed?
Chair Belanger.
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 4 in favor and 2 opposed. Thank you.
I guess we can adjourn.
That's the last motion. So Chair, so brief recess.
Yeah, so, oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, Josh just brought it to my attention. There were two further that's with that motion. Do we presume that that's all part of the same? Yes.
Yeah, these
It
were
was the cost and the M&R involvement discussions.
Oh, sorry, I did not read the last two, I apologize. Further, that council recommend the committee of the whole as budget committee that it allocate an amount of $22,404, cover the cost of the program. Further, that community service section of coordinated committee directs staff to work with Ontario Parks in the implementation of the proposed waterfront safety enhancements. Do we need to re-vote on that, or can we do a show of hands? Or
No, I think the motion that was discussed was the same motion that was printed in the agenda, so.
okay, so we'll take is a 10-minute recess enough for everyone?
Thanks for 9 o'clock.
You're
Just to start again at 9.
Oh, 9
Yeah.
o'clock.
I figured because
call this section of Coordinated Committee, Public Works section back to order. We have no deputations, petitions, or presentations. Under unfinished business, we have the traffic calming policy, which is on the agenda. Other agency reports, there are none, which takes us to our consent agenda. It's moved by Councillor Boulanger, seconded by Councillor Ego. Be it resolved that the Public Works section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the November 9th, 2017 consent agenda items 4.4.1 through to 4.4.3, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted. I don't believe there's anything that's been pulled.
Very good.
Very good. Way to go, Karen.
Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Councillor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Ego?
In favor?
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
In favor.
Chair by Fulci?
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you, and we will adjourn until our next recording secretary comes in. Thank you.
Thank you for your
Call back to order this session, the Development Services section of the Coordinated Committee. Deputations, petitions, presentations, and public meetings. We have a presentation from our Director of Economic Development and Tourism, Andrew McNeil, about the roundabout at Main Street and Beck Street. Andrew.
Jen, what is that idea?
Oh yeah, lots of them. It's okay if I just turn this a little bit. Yep. Okay, Madam Chair, members of committee, is it okay if I?
Am I in your way?
No, do you want a better view of the presentation, or are you?
I've got the handout.
Okay.
Oh.
So, as you may recall, when the downtown master plan was approved, one of the recommendations was to retain alternate street design to assist us in preparing a concept design for roundabout at Main Street and Beck Street. So we have done that. That work is complete, and I wanted to share the design with you today. And as well, I wanted to address a couple issues. There's been a fair amount of chatter on social media about this roundabout and roundabouts in general. It's not new. For some reason, roundabouts cause a bunch of conversation. So I wanted to explain why. Why are we thinking about roundabouts, and particularly at this intersection? Why is it something that we want to entertain here? So I'll start going through the presentation, and I wanted to start with a bit of the existing situation, because it's important to understand what's out there today, what's our vision for the future, and how are these things going to work together. It's very important that economic development, transportation planning, land use planning work as a package. It's a package deal. Whenever you start separating them out and looking at any of those disciplines in isolation, that's when you run into some problems. So this is really about the package deal. So along Main Street today, right now we have stop signs on Beck Street, both north and south, but the traffic along Main Street essentially runs unimpeded. That's important to understand as we move forward. For a pedestrian, today the only place that you're actually supposed to cross the street is at Stonebridge Avenue, where we have a signalized intersection, and there's actually some markings on the ground to state that's where you should cross the road. Or on the other side of the bridge, there's an area here, right by historic Main Street. The rest of this corridor essentially is for cars. Vibrant Main Streets, you really want to promote people being able to cross the street. It's important. If you've got to go to the other side to get to your bank, grocery store, restaurant, cafe, whatever it is, you need to be able to cross the street. Most vibrant main streets, there's an unofficial saying that are judged by the ability to jaywalk. So great main streets, you can jaywalk quite easily. That's not quite the case along this corridor today. So that's about 850 meters, 2,800 feet between signed pedestrian crossings. In an urban area, in a downtown, you typically find block frontages of between 100 and 200 meters. That's done very deliberately so that people can cross streets, and intersections are quite important places. When you think about the evolution of our Main Street over time, River Road in Maine is an important intersection, Beck in Maine is an important intersection. There may be an opportunity in here as well, because that's quite a long block. So the point I'm trying to make here is, as we move forward, people are going to have to cross the street. So we're going to have to find ways to allow that to occur if we are going to be successful. What's out there today is very auto-centric. That will need to evolve. And I'll talk a little bit about why a roundabout may be an option to consider. There's a saying a lot of people use that if you design a street like a gun barrel, people tend to drive like bullets. I'm not saying that speeding is necessarily an issue on Main Street today. A lot of the locals know there's an OPP station a couple blocks away, and they tend to sit out in the Glenwood parking lot. That's a bit of a speed deterrent. But coming along there this morning, driving into town, speeds were high 60s, low 70s along this corridor. Great main streets, and I think that's something that we should be striving for, is to develop a great main street. The unofficial rule is 25 miles per hour, 40 kilometers. That's the speed that you want to be below for a successful main street. If you're operating at speeds higher than that, you tend to have a bit of an issue, and your businesses don't thrive the way they should in a main street. Given that we're a tourist town, tourism is our economy, a vibrant, thriving Main Street is a significant tourist draw, and we need to be paying attention to getting it right as we move forward. I took this photo off of Google Earth, and this just illustrates, here's a stop sign on Beck Street, traffic running east-west. I'm not sure why this guy was walking along with a television on his shoulder with no bicycle seat, but that probably explains why he's not riding his bike. But what you tend to observe, particularly in the summer months, is we tend to have a lot of pedestrians walking east-west. You don't notice a lot of them crossing the street. As we move forward, we have a large older adult population. Older adults, physically challenged, disabled, young children. This can be a little daunting to actually cross this street. It's something that we need to consider moving forward and to be planning for that moving forward. Main and Beck is what we refer to as a skewed intersection, and it's actually at an oblique angle. A lot of engineers prefer to try and avoid skewed intersections. You typically try and create 90-degree intersections, because that makes ideal sight lines when you're trying to cross the road, turn right, turn left. If you're going to have a skewed intersection, this is actually the good angle to have it on, because when you approach Main, you can actually see oncoming traffic, and you can negotiate it fairly easy. I have crossed this intersection many times, as I'm sure all of us have. Occasionally you see a little bit of some strange behavior by motorists. So skewed intersections can be challenging to some who find it difficult to look right or left. The TAC manual, last time I read it, which was a few years ago, that's the engineer's Bible, typically states that if you go beyond a 70-degree intersection, which is a little bit less than this, that you try and avoid that. So we're not far off at 64 degrees, so it's still within the realm of not too bad. If it was skewed at an angle like this, you'd have some real issues. But point being, it's a skewed intersection. We can make it a little bit safer. I think you're all familiar with this drawing, with Roundabout as a gateway to our new vibrant portion of our Main Street, as well as immediately adjacent to our town square. It's a traffic calming tool. It supports the rest of the vision. At vibrant town square, you really need to pay attention to the speed of vehicles that are adjacent to that town square. I think all of us can probably agree that if you're going to build a town square, you want it to be vibrant, full of people, and you want people to feel safe when they're in the square. If cars are driving at 65, 70, maybe even a little bit higher, that detracts from the quality of that space. It detracts from the quality of your Main Street. Roundabouts are traffic calming tools that are used in situations like this all over the world, and I'll share an example with you in a couple slides. So there are a bunch of reasons we looked at this. One is to support the vision for Main Street. You've heard us talk on quite a few occasions about the type of retail commercial experience that we're trying to achieve. similar to what you may see over at the Village of Blue with mom and pops, small scale restaurants, cafes, the type of place that you go out and you walk along. So between Beck and the bridge, that's really the core of the vibrant commercial experience. And that's why it's so critical that that environment actually be traffic calmed. A few years back, a firm I worked with designed what is generally regarded as one of the premier main streets in the United States. If you've been to Orlando, it's called Park Avenue in Winter Park. If you haven't been there, you should go. It's absolutely beautiful. And one of the tools that we used then to traffic calm, we did unit paver surface, but we actually milled each of the unit pavers to control speeds, so that if you drove over 15 miles an hour, your steering wheel shook, and it made it very uncomfortable for you to drive faster. If you were under 15 miles per hour, it was actually quite comfortable. So the speeds along that street were slow, and they added and complemented the Main Street environment. A roundabout, earlier I showed you that there are 2 stop signs on Beck Street, but essentially free flow traffic on the east-west. What a roundabout does is it equalizes that situation. So at all intersections, now the traffic speed is the same. So whatever the design speed is of your roundabout, that's what a pedestrian has to negotiate whenever they choose to cross the street. So it equalizes that unbalanced situation of having free flow in one direction and stop signs in the other. I think most of us are familiar with roundabouts. A few years ago, a lot of people were concerned about roundabouts because they just hadn't dealt with them. There are so many popping up in Ontario it's really not an excuse anymore. But I want to very deliberately explain what a modern roundabout is, because that is very different from the majority of what you see. It is very different from what you see at Highway 26 and on your way to Collingwood. Modern roundabouts are smaller, they're slower speeds. They have splitter islands here that perform a pedestrian refuge, as well as an apron around the center. So just to remind everybody how roundabouts work. Roundabouts, you yield to oncoming traffic. You can go right, you can go through, you can go around. We all get that. Fairly simple. For pedestrians, some of you may not be as familiar with how roundabouts work for pedestrians. They're actually much easier to negotiate than signalized intersections. Most signalized intersections, you come up, you press the little button, and you wait for the little guy on the light to change to white, and then you cross the street. That could take a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, depending on the timing. In a roundabout, you approach the intersection, you look left to see if there's an oncoming car. If there's a gap, you cross to the center. You look right, see if there's a gap, and you cross to the other side. It minimizes delay. It minimizes delay not only for cars, it minimizes delay for pedestrians. So it's much more convenient to actually cross the street. With large trucks, not an issue. That's what the apron in the middle is for. So large transport trucks will actually be able to mount the inside apron to negotiate turns, and they're deliberately designed that way. You don't want to over-design your roundabout because if it's too big, cars move too fast and it makes it unsafe for pedestrians. So you actually want it to be designed tight so that the large vehicles actually have to use the apron. Dozens and dozens of examples of transit vehicles, larger vehicles being able to go through. This apron here is very important. You want that to be vertical enough that it discourages cars from mounting it. So you don't want cars to be able to mount this and drive right through, because that's a way that they can increase their speeds. So that vertical dimension has to be enough that it forces cars to go through the roundabout. That keeps everything safer for all involved. Great roundabouts, particularly in urban areas, should have design speeds where cyclists are quite comfortable to ride right through the roundabout. They can take over the lane and they're not afraid to take over the lane from an automobile. And you'll find that in most urban situations. You don't have that situation at 26 today because that's a different type of roundabout. They come in all shapes and sizes. Some are incredibly unwieldy. The European ones, very fast moving. You can get up to 6 lane wide. That's not what we are talking about. This is an example down in Lido Key, Sarasota. I don't know if any of you have been here. But St. Armand Circle is one of the premier retail streets in the entire state of Florida. It's designed around a roundabout, and it's designed for slow-moving cars. This is also one of the premier tourist draws in the state, in Sarasota County. Just as an example of the importance of main streets, how your street design, your road design needs to support your land use. Transportation infrastructure is supposed to support land use, not the other way around. So it's important that you right size your streets and that you get your speeds appropriate. The interesting thing about the state of Florida, they're a little ahead of us on a number of fronts. Pedestrians actually have the priority in the state of Florida. That's something that we need to work towards because that's the right thing to do, that's the smart thing to do. So whenever you cross a roundabout in the state of Florida, cars must stop for you. Here's the roundabout at Highway 26. And part of, this is my theory of why roundabouts evoke such emotions in Ontario. First of all, there's a bit of a learning curve, but we've also been the victim of a number of poorly designed roundabouts in our province. The issue with this one at 26 is speed. It was designed as a fast in, fast out roundabout. That's not the safest way to design a roundabout. Next time you go through this, take a look at your speedometer and see how fast you can actually go through this. I did this about a week ago. I just wanted to see if I actually pushed it, how fast I could go. I'm not going to tell you the speed I actually reached because this is being videotaped. But I will tell you, it was significant. You shouldn't be able to do that. A properly designed roundabout forces you to slow down. It's a traffic calming tool. The other thing about the roundabout at 26 is it's multi-lane. Safer roundabouts are single lane, and the majority of modern roundabouts are single lane. That's what we're proposing on Main Street, makes it safer. So a modern roundabout, and particularly the one that we are looking at, is a slow in, slow out. That's very important that everyone understands that, because that's the biggest differential between what we're talking about and the mistakes that have been made in other roundabouts. Slow in, slow out makes it safer for everybody involved, for motorists, for pedestrians, for cyclists. You'll also notice on the left that a modern roundabout easily fits inside of the majority of those larger roundabouts. So they're smaller and very deliberately so. Roundabouts in general have proven to be much safer than traditional intersections. They minimize conflict points. Conflict points are essentially places where you can get killed or where you can have an accident. So a roundabout reduces vehicle conflict points down to 8 from 32. So think about a traditional intersection. You can drive through, you can turn right, you can turn left. Wherever you have the potential to meet another car, that's a conflict point. Traditional intersections, you can have T-bones, quite severe accidents. You will rarely, if ever, hear of somebody getting killed in a roundabout. Typically what happens, the worst case scenario is you may sideswipe a car and you may have some paint damage to your car. There have been instances where the occasional inebriated driver has driven straight through a roundabout and mounted the center area. Those are very rare, and that's also why it's very important that you build something vertical in the middle. So you'll notice landscaping, clock towers, you name it, can go in the middle. That's very important to signal to motorists that there's something ahead, slow down, go around the roundabout. For pedestrians, I showed you earlier how a pedestrian negotiates a roundabout, much safer than a traditional intersection, 8 conflict points versus 24. I'll also mention that single lane roundabouts have proven to be easier to use for visually impaired. So when you get into multiple lanes, it becomes difficult for visually impaired to actually pick up and identify where the cars are. So single lane roundabouts are actually much safer for all involved. Mentioned earlier that part of why we're exploring this is because it supports the vision of what we're trying to achieve. Top right, this is actually on the ground at St. Armand's. You can see the type of, it's a beautiful environment, quite safe for pedestrians. Bottom left, that's what the retail, the shopping experience looks like in St. Armand's. The lower speeds that are created by the roundabout make it more attractive to people. There's nothing worse for a main street than to have high vehicle speeds that create road noise. When council was down in Port Credit, this is my biggest beef about Port Credit, it has the potential to be a great main street. It's not today, and the reason for it is the vehicle speeds on Lakeshore are too fast. The road noise generated by cars makes it difficult to have a conversation with somebody. It makes it a little unpleasant when you're sitting at a cafe. So lower the speeds, reduces road noise, makes it more pedestrian friendly, more attractive to people. That thereby helps businesses survive. Restaurants can create cafes that are actually enjoyable to sit at. Top left is a cafe right at a roundabout. If that situation was unpleasant, people probably wouldn't be sitting at those cafe tables. So it's a package deal. On the safety front, roundabouts have proven to be 30% more efficient than signalized intersections. And actually, a number of communities are moving towards getting rid of signals completely and putting multiple roundabouts along streets. It not only makes it safer, it lowers speeds, but it actually moves traffic faster. It's just that moving it at a more efficient and safe way. Fatal crashes are reduced by 90%. That's a big deal. Injury crashes are reduced by 76%, and all crashes are reduced by almost 40%. So when you look at all of the factors, roundabouts significantly outperform all other intersection approaches. This is a project I was involved with a few years ago in my past life, which was bringing Sheridan College to downtown Mississauga. This is, compared to what we're talking about, this is light years in difference. And the reason for it, just off the screen here, was City Center Transit Terminal, significant amounts of bus traffic. Across the street from Sheridan College, Square One, one of the busiest malls in Canada, 24 million annual visitors. To put that in perspective, we're attracting just shy of 2 million. They're bringing in 24. That's on par with Niagara Falls in terms of visitation. And we were very concerned when we were building this college. One side of the campus was on the south side of the street, one side on the north. We were concerned with that volume of traffic splitting the campus, that students were going to get hit. So what we did to resolve the situation is we designed and built a roundabout in combination with a Woonerf, which is essentially a flush street with something in the middle, and it's designed to deflect traffic around. So as a motorist, you're actually forced to go around, and that has been proven to reduce vehicle speeds. Interesting in comparison to some of the chatter going on in Wasaga Beach, the residents in Mississauga loved this. They supported it. They had no issue with it. Engineers fought vigorously against it. I received emails from engineers saying people are gonna die here, do not do this, you would not believe what we went through to get this thing built. The largest person advocating against doing this, the day it opened, was standing there with Global Television, receiving all the accolades for how wonderful and innovative it was. A few months later, he was on the stage receiving an award from the Institute of Transportation Engineers for innovation in transportation planning. It has worked beautifully, and it is the first of many that will be built in Mississauga. Waterloo, Toronto, other municipalities are putting these in all over the place. Waterloo is probably the leader in the province at promoting livable transportation, and roundabouts are going up all over the place in Waterloo. Public art, we did a public art competition for the middle. It's a little not to my taste, but that's what won. It's in place today. Long story short, it's an opportunity for Wasaga Beach to do something creative in the middle. You need to do something vertical, you can put some trees in there, you can do some public art and do something that's unique for our community. It's an opportunity. You will find in many communities across North America, roundabouts are gateways to unique districts, cultural districts. There's one in Carmel. They offer an opportunity to do something beautiful. Don't underestimate the importance of beauty, particularly in a tourist town. That's what people are attracted to. That's why people go to Niagara on the Lake. Niagara on the Lake is beautiful. That's something that, as a community, there's nothing wrong with us aspiring to be beautiful. That's only going to help us, and roundabouts are an important tool that we can use. Here is the design that Alternate Street Design came up with, and the additional factor that I wanted to mention. In the master plan, we are looking at potentially extending Forest Avenue to Back Street. That creates a 5-legged intersection. So when I mentioned earlier that regardless of whether or not council decides to build a roundabout, you will need to do something. You've either got to signalize it, you've got to put in stop signs or something in the future to allow people to cross the street at this intersection. Given the fact that it's a 5-legged intersection, roundabout is one of the best tools to solve that. They are one of the best tools for dealing with little abnormal intersections. So we have 5 legs coming in. What we've done is what engineers typically do is they look at fastest path. So you remember earlier I talked about the one at 26. The design speed on that is quite high, and you can actually go through that quite fast. This has a design speed of 36 kilometers an hour. So you are physically forced, even if you are very skilled at driving through roundabouts, the most you should be able to drive through this at is 36 kilometers an hour. Most will go through slower, and that's a good thing because it's a traffic calming tool that will help make our main street that much more beautiful, that much more successful. But we have looked at the fastest path, and just to orient you as well, you'll notice on the north side we have the protected bike lane that is part of the design, the proposed design for Main Street. So instead of cyclists going through the roundabout itself, which they can do for those with road bikes that want to ride on Main Street, they can do it, it will be safe. But for those elderly, older adults, those with young children, they will probably prefer to ride on the protected bike lane. So they can negotiate that quite easily. We've also looked at through movement. It's been designed for a WB17, which is a fairly large truck. You'll actually notice most can negotiate this fairly reasonably. An extremely large truck that may go through this and may want to make this turn onto Forest, maybe they're coming to drop off supplies for the square, an event that was going on, they can actually go around and through. So it actually accommodates all moves quite successfully. Just wanted to illustrate to a decade or so ago, you wouldn't have found this on the Ministry of Transportation's website. Times are changing. in this province. The Ministry of Transportation has accepted the fact, and they now promote the fact that roundabouts are actually safer than intersections. And there's a whole bunch of things that they have on their website. For those of you who are at the point where you may be taking your license, I know my folks have a couple years to go before they have to do it. It's now part of your driver training that you have to learn how to negotiate roundabouts, because the province is telling us that these are going to become the norm everywhere we go. A couple additional points I'll add. From an environmental perspective, they reduce idling, which is better for the environment, less pollution, and lower maintenance costs. In the event that there's a power outage, all your signals go down, roundabouts keep working. You don't have to worry about the power going out, your traffic can keep going. So that's presentation. I hope that addresses some, if not all, of the questions that you may be hearing from folks, but I'm more than happy to answer questions now or later on in the agenda.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Stockwell.
Through you, Madam Chair. So what is the opposition to these, your residents' expertise that we hear every day and read about every day? When they oppose it, what is it based on?
So I'll be honest, I don't pay a lot of attention to social media, as many as some. Some of the things that I've heard through the grapevine is they think they're dangerous for pedestrians. So I hope this presentation answers that actually that's not true. They're actually safer for pedestrians. And the current situation, I don't think people understand that what's out there today is not safe for people crossing the street. So we're actually solving that. I think probably, again, what's out there in a lot of the province are these large, fast-moving roundabouts. And I agree, I personally don't like them that much myself. So people may be associating that with what we're doing. That's not the case. These are slow-moving, they're safe, and they're quite efficient.
But you have open door every Wednesday morning. People come and sit and meet with you. The people that are opposed to roundabouts, that's what they're hanging their hat on?
Honestly, I haven't had one person come in and ask a question about a roundabout.
Really?
My understanding is that it's all going on social media, so I haven't had one person come in and say, why are you doing this? This doesn't make sense. So the purpose of this was to respond to, I think, what's going on social media, and I hope this will answer some of those questions. And if people still have questions, come on out to Wednesday, and I'm happy to go into more detail. One other point I would add is Kevin Lalonde has put in some dollars to do an environmental assessment for Main Street. So this will be evaluated as part of that process. So we're not asking council to make any decisions today. This is strictly for information. But this is the preferred approach in the master plan to work with the vision.
And you're telling us that you have had no individual come to your meetings or write you a letter or anything else opposing roundabouts?
I had one email that was written over a year ago about this intersection. We responded to that and haven't had any follow-up, but nobody has come out in person to the morning sessions.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Bartolci.
Thank you. Good presentation. Hopefully it does answer a lot of questions for those talking about it on social media. It is for information. It does have to go through the EA process. And I have spoken to Kevin about parts of that. I think years ago we designed 4 lanes to go through there to move traffic. So through that EA process, I'm hoping that it will also show, I understand why we would move down to 2 lanes for that stretch of Main Street that will have those bottom businesses to slow the traffic for them. But I'm also concerned about on either side of that. We built for future growth. We're now getting the future growth, and now we're going smaller. So he has said that it will look through that process as well. I think the EA will show the pros and cons to not just that section of Main Street and what the roundabout would do for it, but the rest of the town as well. We have a river running through us, and I think we have to take everything into consideration. The one question I did have is EAs of this scope can usually take some time. would this be a 12 to 14 month process, or what are you thinking?
I'll defer that to Kevin to answer during that process. He's not here today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
But
you.
if I could, through Madam Chair, a couple of points that you just made. This is important. What we're talking about here is a paradigm shift for Wasaga Beach. Most communities, when you're in suburban sprawl, a lot of the focus is on moving cars faster and further. It's about minimizing delay, increasing speeds. That does not work with this approach. So if the goal is to create a vibrant, successful Main Street that's walkable, that's safe for pedestrians, you need to move past that. The great communities that have achieved that don't pay a lot of attention to that kind of stuff. They accept level of service F and they get on with life. So if you have a bit of congestion here, it's not the end of the world. Congested places are typically the most vibrant and the most economically successful. Roundabouts are actually a tool that kind of finds that happy balance between moving cars and creating a great place. So a 2-lane road with roundabouts can outperform a 4-lane street with signals. That's been proven in many communities. So we do have the potential to do that here. And the reason for that is it minimizes the delay that where you sit at a stoplight. Roundabouts keep stuff moving. There's a bit of a delay when somebody crosses the street, but it's not typically more than a couple seconds. And then you keep moving. That's something that we can look at as part of the EA.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, and just, yeah, and you've touched on a few points, but I think my point was we have 2 roads that go around a river, and again, we want some congestion there for those few businesses, but we have a whole town. So I want to make sure that by slowing it here and people who are trying to get from here past that, what is the impact on them? So that's all I'm saying, is that I hope that the EA takes all of that into consideration.
And this will be my last comment on it, because this is actually quite important. Council needs to make a choice. There's a choice to be made here. Do you want to create a destination that people drive to and interact with, or are you trying to focus on throughputs? Most communities that fail focus on throughputs. It's about getting people through the community faster, building bypasses. Look at what the new highway did between Wasaga and Collingwood to all those businesses along Ramblewood. They're struggling. They're going out of business because we built a bypass, because we focused on throughputs. You have to accept that congestion is not a bad thing within a community. That's the big leap, and I get that a lot of folks struggle with that. But again, think of it simplistically. When you go on vacation, where are the places that you want to go and spend some time in? I guarantee you, you're not going to go spend your 2-week vacation in some community that Irvine, California, which is a god-awful place that focuses on, level of service for cars. You're going to go to some place that's wonderful that focuses on people and building a great place for people. That's the leap that Wasaga Beach needs to make. It is different. It's a paradigm shift, and there's going to be some struggle. I get it.
My final comment, thank you. I understand that we want to create a destination. My point is, we can't forget the community that lives here all the time, and that community has places to get to as well. So while we're creating this destination, let's not forget the community who uses it every day. That's my point.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor?
Yeah, I'd like to know, this is a first good step, having the presentation here and videotaped, and I'm sure that will get out in many ways, but this is certainly a piece where public engagement would be important. I think the piece also that there's a lot of chatter is the location of a community hub and cultural center. That's something that we need to build a similar piece. Certainly there's a lot of chatter on that, and there's a lot out there. I just saw something on Sudbury and what they're trying to do, and I guess one of my challenges for me, and I think that we need to get out to our general public, is the people that have worked with us on these plans are the foremost experts at doing what they do, transportation, creating a place. Their whole life is they work on this. They're considered experts, not just in Canada. It's beyond that. And yet, we'll get an individual that presumably might have been a post office worker, or we don't know what their occupation was, and they put out there and try to come across as some form of expertise on these subjects, but they don't have the credentials. And we need to take this information to our community in a very diligent manner. Because they're getting a lot more inaccurate information today than they are getting accurate information.
Yes, you'd like to respond, Andrew?
Yeah, if I could just a couple of points. I wanted to just briefly explain who the person was that designed this, because I think it's important to understand this. So Michael Walwork, who is the principal of Alternate Street Design, is the former transportation engineer for the City of Melbourne, Australia. He's now works in the state of Florida. He advises the state DOT. City of Melbourne in the 60s, early 70s, was doing a lot of stuff that Wasaga Beach has done and somewhat still continues to do. The state came into Melbourne and took over planning controls from the City of Melbourne and said, until you learn to plan a city properly, we're going to do it for you. They learned pretty quickly, and Michael was one of the folks that came in. They built roundabouts all over that city, LRT, you name it. They transformed Melbourne from a suburban, car-oriented place to what it is today, which is consistently one of the most livable, economically successful cities in the world. So that's the guy that just designed this roundabout for us. He gets the objectives of how economic development, land use, transportation need to work together. And he's been through that transition phase. We are just starting the transition phase. It's not easy. I don't pretend that it is. Education, community engagement is critical. I'll work with Michael Jennings. Perhaps we can do up a little fact sheet on the roundabout. We met with Fouric yesterday on the community hub. There will be a community meeting where we will get out in front of the community, explain all of that stuff. So we'll continue to do the best we can.
Thank you. Councillor Stockwell, did you have a question? No. Any other questions on the field?
Just a comment, Madam Chair, with respect to the EA process. The EA process is a public process, and the public will be offered the opportunity to provide comment on what you've seen today, and all of that will go into a report that will come forward to council, and council will see both sides of the discussion with respect to the EA, the pros and cons of what a roundabout can bring to the community. So I would encourage members of the public to get informed with respect to this and the issues around transportation and moving people, and provide input to that process, because it's a very public process.
Thank you, George. I have a couple of comments. I'm the victim of one of the accidents at Beck and Main Street.
Okay.
I find that people on Beck Street I call it a Wasaga Beach stop. They don't stop. They kind of slowly move across. And unfortunately, the car that thought they could make it was pulling a trailer and didn't. I had no place to go but hit the trailer. I don't think it's very safe. And also with the further down, I think it will solve some of the issues down around as well. I have traveled around the world, and I have seen more countries with traffic circles than I've seen in Canada. You go to Europe, you go to England, you go to Bermuda, you go to the islands. They're all using traffic circles, and it doesn't seem, I mean, they've been using them forever, and it doesn't seem to have caused any problems for any of those communities. So I think it's a great way to go, and I look forward to the report coming forward. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gray.
Thank you. Just one comment. Great presentation, lots of good information. I too am quite familiar with roundabouts. I haven't seen a lot of 5-point roundabouts, and I just wondered if moving forward you could maybe show some examples of that. Just because you're adding kind of more confusion to a smaller, so we've made it smaller, but we're adding another entry, so I'm having a hard time kind of
Yeah, and
visualizing. So
in
not
res-
that per se, but actually maybe overlaying over the road or just in that little space that we have, because I know it's not going to be like the one at 26. But that's the only thing I'm having a hard time is figuring out where the 5 spaces are going to go in a small circle.
Okay, so in response, I mean, that's the design right in front of you. So again, Michael Walwork, who has designed and built over 700 of these, he is the one that created this design. He feels quite comfortable that it is safe and that the design is appropriate. Do I have an arsenal of 5-legged roundabout images? I would have to go and check the web. May be able to find some out there. I'm sure they exist. There's probably more than 5 lanes that come into some of these. But at the end of the day, Michael is the expert, knows far more about these than I, and I take his recommendation. I'd actually love to get him in front of council at some point.
Is that possible?
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, just one other thing related. Some of us here also attended a cycling forum about 6 months ago. And, part of moving towards a silver designation and everything else, they gave many examples there of taking 4 lanes and reducing it and actually reducing accidents and increasing traffic. So the traffic may, to your point, it may be moving at a slower rate of speed, but the number of vehicles that are going through has increased. So just because you go to 2 lanes doesn't mean that you're going to be creating backup on either the front side or the back side. It just means that you're flowing traffic differently.
Yeah, and if you'll recall, one of the reasons why we recommended that this be the future home of downtown is to minimize congestion. It's about road network. So you want to have your downtown in an area with as many different routing options as possible. This is one of, Wasaga Beach is challenged with its network, there's no question. This is one of the few places in Wasaga Beach that actually has some options. And that's one of the key reasons why it's the best place to put a downtown. Because if one street's a little more congested, you can take another option. You can take another route. So that is part of this. But again, you shouldn't fear a bit of backup. Most main streets have that. If the goal is to create a main street where traffic goes through quickly, my recommendation would be step back. Maybe you want to reconsider what you're trying to achieve, because Port Credit, it's okay, it's not great, it could be great. Burlington has undertaken road diets. They've gone from 4 to 2 lanes within their downtown. It's now much more cycle friendly. They're doing it all over the place in their city. So road diets have become an accepted thing.
Sorry, just one more comment. The other thing too is I've been recently, been on 60th and 61st and different side streets, and it's not uncommon now to come out to the stop sign and have to wait 5 or 6 minutes to enter. So, we're talking about the roundabout here, but when you look at our town, there's roundabouts that are required in other areas because, and they're going to greatly improve traffic flow. Like today, it's crazy, and even this time of year.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for Andrew? I note that got a motion here. Oh, yeah. Okay. We've had one pulled, and that was for the report from Andrew. Just for information. So, I don't know if we have a note.
Yeah, the consent agenda first.
Yes.
And then you have the motion to
Okay. So we'll do the consent agenda first, and then we'll do with the motion with roundabouts. It's just for information.
Sorry, I pulled that, and I'll withdraw that now. Obviously, I wasn't sure if we were receiving for information or whether the presentation would actually be done, but my questions have been answered.
Okay.
Very good.
Okay, so where are we here? Thank you. I have a motion now, so resolved that the Development Services Section Coordinated Committee hereby receives the November 9th, 2017 consent agenda items 5.1 through 5.4.3, and that all the recommendations contained therein be adopted. It was moved by Councillor Stockwell and seconded by Councillor Eagle. Oh, there was nothing else to hold, I believe.
No, that was it. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
In favor?
Councillor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Ito?
In favor?
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Chair Smith?
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
So I think we'll take another 10-minute break and continue with the rest of the meeting.
back to order for the General Government Section of Coordinating Committee. Deputations, presentations, petitions, and public meetings, we have none. Unfinished business, there is none. Other agency reports, we have none. And a consent agenda. All items listed below will be approved by one resolution. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests it, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda resolution and considered immediately following adoption of the remaining consent agenda items. 2 items have been pulled. Section C, Finance, Director of Finance and Treasury, Society St. Vincent de Paul Food Assistance Program. And item B, Director of Legislative Services and the Clerk, Legal Consultation Costs related to the Integrity Commissioner's investigation follow-up report. So, the motion reads. Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Deputy Mayor Bifulci. Resolved the General Government Section of Coordinated Committee hereby receives the November 9th, 2017 consent agenda, items 6.41 through to 6.43, and that the recommendations contained therein be adopted as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bifulci.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Bray.
In favor?
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor and 0 opposed.
Thank you. First item to be pulled. The legal consultation costs related to Integrity Commissioner investigations. This was a follow-up report by the clerk and was pulled by me. Not sure if anyone else has comments or questions. If not, my concern with this one is that I feel it's unnecessary to be considering subjecting our taxpayers to absorb more costs for the Integrity Commissioner. I think the Integrity Commissioner was chosen when the province offered as the Ombudsman, and again, to provide legal costs to council and to employees for items related to the Integrity Commissioner is not something I can support at this time. No other comments? Motion? Councillor Stockwell?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the CAO. On the basis of the Integrity Commissioner, I realize that he's serving until May of next year. And help me on that.
Okay. So his contract actually ends in December of this year. We have asked if he would consider an extension to early in 2018. As committee may recall, the county has embarked on a process to hire a integrity commissioner that all municipalities could subscribe to, and the town of Wasaga Beach has indicated its support of that initiative. So that decision will be made by county council probably in the next few weeks, probably in December. I think the RFP process is underway and almost concluding. So we've offered to extend our current arrangement until such time as the county has their integrity commissioner in place.
So my question is, and maybe you can help me, are we going to get a scorecard from him as to how many items he dealt with and our general cost over the years of the contract, as well as how many referrals did he get from the general public? How many referrals did he get from members of council? I don't want names. I just want numbers. Is that a possibility before we deal with him again?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, it is a possibility. He will be presenting as per his contract an annual report to committee and council. So I think it'll probably follow a similar format to his earlier annual report, the one he did last year. But certainly I'll look and through discussions with the clerk and with the integrity commissioner how much detail. I think it's rolled up in terms of the level of detail. I can't recall off the top of my head if it breaks it down in terms of council to council or public to council. I can't recall that to a councillor, but certainly without breaching any confidentiality, maybe that's something that can be put in his report.
Yeah, because Madam Chair, through you, I know precious little of what he does on a day-to-day basis. I know he got a complaint against me early in his term, and it was dealt with and set aside as frivolous. But I don't know if that's the standard. Is that 80% of the stuff he gets, or what? So those are the things that I'd like to know before we make any further decisions on it. That's a possibility.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, I think it's a possibility with respect to number of complaints that are proceeded to report, those that have been dismissed, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Bethel-G.
Thank you. So before just going ahead with him for another 6 months or whatever it would be, it would come back to this table. I thought there was something written in the code of conduct or the agreement or whatever with him that during an election year, he can't deal with complaints against members of council. So I'm just curious, and maybe I'm off on that, but if that statement is there, then why would we even sign on for another 6 months? Why would we not just leave that time frame with the ombudsman? Or so if we can just have that looked into as well.
Further follow up on that. Was it an election year, or was it from the time the writ was dropped?
I don't remember. That's why I'm asking.
I kind of thought it was from the time, like at the May.
Right.
Yeah,
The code of conduct actually has a date in it. I think it's January 1st.
It is January 1st.
Yeah. So there's an actual date in the code of conduct, not a term of the election.
I wasn't saying that we needed the answer right this second, but just when it comes back to council for decision, I think that's important to have our minds wrapped around as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in reviewing the Council Code of Conduct, it refers to no complaints regarding a member who is a candidate in an election between nomination day, which would be July 27th for 2018, and the date of the inaugural meeting of Council, which was the beginning of December, essentially. I don't know the exact date.
It's on the calendar.
For the inaugural? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There might be another section of the code that applies.
So,
just because I read it, whether it was the procedural bylaw or the code of conduct, I've read it in the last couple of days. Councillor Stockwell?
yeah. Mr. CEO, can you expand on that? Am I hearing that once you file your papers for the next election, then you're kind of out from under the watchdog? But if you don't file papers, you're still under the watchdog. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll defer to the clerk with respect to that, and as the deputy mayor has asked for some additional information, but perhaps we can wrap all that up in a brief report back to committee, and so that everybody understands, include all that information.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As far as this issue goes, I believe we still have a staff issue that we haven't resolved, and we should perhaps look at going in camera at some point, not this meeting, but we still have a staff request and before us in camera, and regarding financing for paying for legal expenses. So I think we need to go in camera at some point on the next agenda perhaps and discuss that, because that's unfinished business, basically.
Deputy Mayor Bethel-G.
I'll look to the CAO. Is that not what this report is about? Would that not deal with that situation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report deals with policy with respect to establishing a policy where no policy existed before. But Councillor Smith is correct. We do have an outstanding request from a staff member that has not been dealt with. So we do not have a policy. If council approves this policy, then we will have a policy to provide guidance to council.
No other questions? I'm sorry, Councillor.
Yeah, I just had one other question as far as the Integrity Commissioner too. I wanted an understanding of the cost of the Integrity Commissioner when he receives a complaint, he sends a letter, he dismisses the complaint. So, you know, that's a pretty small part of an Integrity Commissioner's involvement, but I'd like to understand, is that $1,000 cost? Is it $500? Because it certainly has, in my opinion, I suspect that there could be members of the public that have registered more than one complaint. I don't know that, and we're not asking for names. But I believe there has been some very frivolous complaints that are costing our taxpayers money. And I'd like to have an understanding if that the Integrities Commissioner's position, if they were getting multiple complaints from a single individual, how that's viewed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll ask the Integrity Commissioner with respect to his process for reviewing and then rendering a decision to dismiss a complaint and how long that takes. I'm sure every complaint is looked at on an individual basis, so it may be just as an average. It might be a half hour, it might be an hour to reach that decision. I don't know. I'll ask the question and then I'll report back to the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Smith?
Just one more follow-up, if I may, and I've talked to our Andrea about this, sorry. When I was reading through this, it doesn't seem to affect, there's a section that is missing for staff members. For example, if a staff member is the one that wants to call the Integrity Commissioner, there's no provision that that staff member who is a victim reporting it, there's no provision in this as far as staff goes, just for council. But it mentions staff in one section, but it doesn't mention staff with regards to how to proceed if it's a staff member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not entirely sure that I understood the question, but just to provide some clarity, hopefully. So the policy, the draft policy, would not apply to any expenses incurred by either a member of council or an employee prior to a formal complaint being filed with the Integrity Commissioner. Where it would come into play is when a formal complaint is filed and the Integrity Commissioner has determined that they are going to proceed with an investigation, so there's merit there. Then the accused, being the member of council in this particular case, would be able to receive an initial legal consultation of up to a maximum of 1 hour. And then if the Integrity, and that's it at that point, should the Integrity Commissioner provide a formal report, both the complainant and the accused are eligible to obtain legal advice of up to 2 hours, keeping in mind that should the Integrity Commissioner determine that the accused has breached the code of conduct, then the accused would not be reimbursed for any, either the initial or the subsequent 2 hours. So those invoices would be held until such time as the decision was made, and then reimbursement would be provided at that point.
So then, throw a question back to you. So if the complaint at that point is determined to be frivolous, the staff member would still get their legal costs paid?
So, sorry, so the only...
the council member, and the council member would, because they were not guilty of an infraction.
So the only time that that a staff member would be eligible to receive any reimbursement for legals would be if there was a formal report prepared. So it wasn't determined to be frivolous. It was the review was done by the Integrity Commissioner and a report was done. Then the complainant, the member of staff would be able to be reimbursed for up to 2 hours. The member of council would be eligible as well, provided that that report didn't find that there was a breach for that particular member of council. Sorry, is that?
Just that the Integrity Commissioner has traditionally prepared a report, even when he has said there has been no breach, there has been no breach.
Right.
But he has prepared the report. So that was
okay, I see what you're saying. Well,
so either way, the complainant will get legal costs if it's accepted, but the council only gets it if you are not guilty.
Yes, essentially, yeah. The way it's worded right now is that anytime there's a report, it doesn't specify whether there's findings or not. Anytime he takes the time to prepare a report where he feels there's merit, and the member of council, if they're found to have breached the code, they would not be eligible. You're correct.
Okay, thank you. So either way, I think it's crazy to look at adding additional cost to the taxpayers. Deputy Mayor Fulci.
Thank you. Was this final report circulated to the lawyer? And the reason I ask is I know that we did have a legal opinion on this, and this is maybe a little bit different from what was being suggested.
Sorry. Thank you.
So the draft policy that you see in front of you was vetted by the lawyers, and that's their feedback is essentially the items that are highlighted. The only change that we made in addition to that was to the values for the hourly rates. The report itself, no, I did not forward that to our solicitor, but they had reviewed the policy, which is attached, and I've just really pulled that information from there for the report.
Okay.
So one question,
Councillor Stockwell?
final question to the CAO. So given all of what's happened today, we're still going to have a chance to see some type of a recommendation before we extend into next year. Is that correct?
So maybe I'll just defer again to the clerk on that, so.
Sure. Thank you. So this policy, if committee agrees and recommends to council, then that would be in place. And it would go retro to January 1, 2017 as referenced in the report. However, the Integrity Commissioner matter, that I will be bringing a subsequent report to committee based on the direction from the last time a report was brought forward, with a recommendation to move forward with the Integrity Commissioner that's being recommended through the county process, through that RFP process. So then at that point, the committee would need to review to determine if they wish to move forward with that individual.
Okay, that's fine, as long as it's coming back.
Okay. No more comments or questions? I will read the motion. Moved by Councillor Stockwell, seconded by Councillor Belanger. Resolved that the General Government Services section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that the draft legal consultation policy related to Integrity Commissioner investigations be approved effective January 1st, 2017.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
Opposed?
Councillor Ego.
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
Favor.
Councillor Stockwell.
Favor.
Chair Bray.
Opposed.
Thank you. The motion carries on a vote of 4 in favor and 2 opposed. Thank you.
Oh, you guys.
And then the final motion that was pulled was from the Director of Finance and Treasury, Society of St. Vincent de Paul Food Assistance Program. Sorry, okay, pulled by Councillor Stockwell. Councillor Stockwell, you pulled this item?
Which one was that?
Food bank.
St. Vincent de
Oh,
Paul?
yeah, I did, Madam Chair, thank you very much. Just to the author of the report, welcome. You were asked to bring this forward by committee, I believe, on the basis, on what basis?
Madam Chair, through you, when we were reviewing the food bank grant for 2017,
Right.
It was discussed at that time at the table here that there was other food bank services and that additional information would like to be presented. The first time it was requested, it had been missed, and then it was requested a second time.
So, follow-up, Madam Chair. So it's not a case of St. Vincent de Paul asking for a grant?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, they
No.
have not requested a grant.
They just pay for it through the church parish and leave it at that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Belanger?
Thank you. Yes, did they, in your report, it did give an indication of the level of service they provide. I mean, numbers of people. At the time, I know I had made a comment of information I was given from someone associated because they wanted to visit, and I had given a number, and there was some reaction to that from some members of council, and I was hopeful that they may have shared some information with you, because I think it is although it it is a significant benefit to the community, I believe it's a much smaller food bank than the ministerial food bank.
And through you, Madam Chair, yes, I did have through the conversation, understand it to be a smaller service. I did not receive, all the information I received from the person providing information is reflected in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
Just to Councillor Belanger's question, I think if they were coming forward to ask for money, I think those numbers would be relevant, but they're not asking for anything at this point.
I understand that at this time.
That's interesting.
No, I think I was the one that probably asked for this information because when we were considering, a very substantial donation of tax dollars to one food bank, I knew that there was more than one operating, and I just wanted to understand the playing field because I truly didn't know the scope of both.
Yeah. So that was my point, Chair, is that I thought that the number of people they service was relevant to your question.
Except that they're not really asking for money.
No, I understand that.
Yeah. Councilor Stockwell, did you have your hand up?
No, I just, good for them, they're not asking for money.
Okay. Seeing no more comments. Moved by Deputy Mayor Bolton, seconded by Councillor Smith. Resolved that the General Government Services Section of Coordinated Committee recommend to Council that it receive the Treasurer's report on the Society of St. Vincent de Paul Food Assistance Program for information.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having heard the question, I'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger.
In favor?
Deputy Mayor by Fulton.
In favor?
Councillor Ego.
In favor?
Councillor Smith.
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell.
In favor.
Chair Bray. Thank you. Motion carries on a vote of 6 in favor and 0 opposed. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other matters, the date of the next meeting will be December 14th, 2017. There's no closed session required, and this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.